What was the rich man's sin? How did he end up in Hades? And what did Lazarus do to get the coveted spot with Abraham? Now, the man was most likely born rich. Purple was a color reserved for royalty, so he was a very high station. Now, back in the 1st century, if you had wealth and health, it was considered a blessing from God. If you were righteous, God would give you wealth. Conversely, if you were poor or sick, it meant that God was cursing you. You were a great sinner, and you deserved it. So, in the thought of the time, the rich man was a righteous man blessed by God, and Lazarus was a sinner being punished. And of course, we know that this isn't the case anymore. But Jesus had to come along, and he challenges the status quo and reverses the thinking here. So the people listening to this parable were probably very shocked to hear that the rich man was suffering in the afterlife, and Lazarus was being comforted. Surely they would have had the same reaction that the man has, asking Abraham to send Lazarus over with some water. And here we get a glimpse into what the rich man's sin was. It was indifference. Over that great chasm, the rich man calls Lazarus by name, which means that he knew Lazarus' name. This is very important, because Lazarus sat outside this man's gate every day, and every day the man walked by him and ignored him, but he knew his name. Now that's cold. That shows a complete lack of compassion. But he still doesn't understand even the afterlife. He wants Abraham to send the water, then send Lazarus off to warn his brothers to have compassion before it's too late. But Abraham says the key line: if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. Moses, the prophets, and Jesus, of course, the one who rises from the dead, all told people over and over to care for each other, to have compassion for the suffering. But the rich man and his brothers didn't listen. They had lost their sensitivity to the people around them because they let themselves get caught up in their wealth. They lived in a big house surrounded by a wall, and Lazarus sat outside. So they were isolated from the rest of the world, so much so that they forgot that other people are people. And the wall they built in life became a great chasm in the afterlife. Now, parables are not a prediction of the future. These are not things that are meant to be taken literally. So we're not getting, what Jesus thinks the afterlife looks like here. Rather, parables are meant to reveal something to the listener, to show them something about their present lives. So what does this story reveal? Well, we all can get caught up in our wealth. We might not be rich like the rich man was. I'm sure that I'm not. I don't have a castle, But I do have a lot of nice stuff in my apartment. And we do live in America, the land of plenty. And compared to a lot of countries around the world, we are very rich. And our culture at large is consumer-based. We're always supposed to get the newest toy, the latest iPhone, the coolest car. And we can also build walls around ourselves. Like I can put my headphones on in the grocery store, on the train, and then it's like I'm alone. I'm in a little bubble of my own, ignoring everyone else. And they don't talk to me either, because they see that I can't hear them. And we also stay home and buy stuff online, and we chat with our friends on the internet instead of actually going out into the world. And by this, we are building walls around ourselves. So our riches and our walls can stunt our compassion by insulating us from the needs of others. If we lose our compassion for other people, we have lost something that's deeply human, something that makes us human. And over time, if we get numb to this, we can start to think that we ourselves don't need any help or compassion from others too. We can do it on our own. And if this happens, we become like the rich man. David Lowes explains that the chasm in the afterlife was fixed long, long ago and reinforced every time the rich man came and went from his sumptuous abode to feast at his table and ignored Lazarus. He obviously knew Lazarus, yet he did nothing. And that's the thing about parables. Since they're not predictions of the future, we can change the ending. We can be different. We don't have to become the rich man or become Lazarus. We actually can take on the role of the rich man's brothers. We actually can listen to the teachings of Moses and the prophets and the one who did return from the dead. Because Jesus was put to death for announcing God's mercy and grace to all people, and for daring to forgive people, and for caring for the poor, which sounds crazy, right? But that was a radical thing. We can't become like the rich man and be numb to the suffering of other people, because if we do that, we will lose our own humanity. It's not enough to just not hurt people. We have to be active in trying to change things for the better. Because the rich man didn't harm Lazarus in any way, but he didn't help him either. That's the point. The sin of indifference. And in our country, I see that we are growing so indifferent, and it's kind of scary. Every week I read about more innocent people getting shot for sitting in their car, or more people convicted of crimes who just get set free because they had enough money to pay. Is that fair or just? And a lot of our reaction is, well, what can you do? I've said that more than a few times, right? Well, we can speak out against the injustice and the growing indifference that we have. We have to see the injustices, but then act to change things. See the growing class divide, the prejudice, the horrible political rhetoric that we're subjected to, the anger and the fear that surrounds us, and then respond to it, but not with more fear or anger. The only response is love. And we like to think of Jesus as a meek and mild guy who carries little sheeps around, you know. And we like to think that he wants us to come to church every week and feel good about ourselves, which is part of it. But he wasn't a peace-loving hippie. He was a radical preacher, a troublemaker, a protester even. He questioned authority. If he didn't do that, he wouldn't have been killed. He stood up for the little guy and for the poor and the suffering, and we're supposed to do that as well. So always try to look and see this great chasm in our world and work to make it smaller. We should be responsive to the hurts and the hopes and the needs of other people. And then we'll also be aware of those same hurts and hopes and needs of ourselves. And then we can appreciate God's grace in ourselves. And through Christ, we can share that with the rest of the world and actually change the world for the better, of course. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.